Well, the lighting's going to be very inconsistent, but it honestly feeds into something I'm going to talk about later in the video. A couple of months ago, I did a review on the 10 dash cameras that I have. And what I realized was that it would be much more valuable to you, yes, you handsome devil, if instead of reviewing the random dash cameras that I happen to have that are going to be outdated within a year, is telling you guys what to look for when buying a dash camera, specifically for jobs like Uber and Lyft, where you need to record inside the car. There doesn't seem to be a lot of good information on that out there. Everybody's always looking for the outside camera on the car, but that doesn't do you any good when somebody's acting a fool in it. Plus, even if you're not working Uber and Lyft, I find a lot of value in seeing the reaction of when things happen of the people in the car. Now, there's always going to be new and improved models for dash cameras, but the principles of what makes a dash camera good and necessary, and most importantly useful, will always stay the same. And as somebody who's built a channel almost exclusively on dash cam footage, I know exactly what it is that you want to look for as an Uber and Lyft driver, and what features are just marketing hype that you can ignore. So in this video, I'm going to tell you the 3 most important things you want to look for in any dash camera that you get, and then I'll briefly touch on some of the less important features, and then I'll answer the question that so many people ask me: what is the best camera for recording inside the car? Now, even though that other video was more of a dash cam review, I did talk about some of these aspects that I want to share with you today. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to reuse some of those clips, so please forgive the inconsistent visual aesthetic. Though I will say I want a little credit for at least putting on the same outfit to make it look a little more consistent. The most important thing you want to look for when getting a dash camera that no one ever seems to mention, and this goes for everybody, not just Uber and Lyft drivers, but anybody looking for a dash camera, is the memory card. And just to make sure I wasn't totally unlucky, I saw a couple of reviews of Amazon of people's size does matter. And here's why. Almost every dash camera records on a loop. So when the memory card fills up, it just goes back to the beginning and starts recording over the oldest footage. So say you started driving Uber on Friday, and then by Saturday night, your memory card is full. What it's going to do is start recording the new footage over that Friday footage. Of course, almost all dash cams give you the ability to lock a file and save it without going to your computer first, but it's an annoying process, and on top of that, every time you lock a file, it takes up space on that memory card. So if you lock up too many files, you're just not going to have room to record more video. Of course, the natural follow-up question to that is, how long do different memory cards give you to record? I can't give you an exact number because it's all based on the settings of your camera. Are you recording in 4K or 1080p or 5-minute loops or 1-minute loops, if you're using a rear camera or not? So all these kind of things factor into it. I will say, when I did use a 16 gig memory card, it gave me about 90 minutes. When I used a 64 gig, I was good for an entire night, and 128 gig, I was good for about a weekend. And that's being conservative. Right now, I have a 256 gig card, and if you guys saw the video where I worked the entire week of Thanksgiving, I used just that one single card during the making of that video, and I still had room left over. Long story long, avoid a 16 gig card like the plague, and one of the first things I would do when I do get a dash camera and a memory card to go with it is take note of how long it takes until it fills up. So if you know that you got 12 hours of space on your memory card and something in your car happens that you want to save, just know that you better get to a computer before that 12 hours is up. Otherwise, make sure to lock the file. Okay, so now that you know the most important thing about getting a dash camera, the top 2 features that you're going to want with a dash camera as an Uber or Lyft driver above anything else is an interior cabin camera with infrared lights, aka night vision, and also the ability to record audio. Hey, D-Nice? Denise.
And I know what you're thinking. How do you determine if the camera has good video and audio quality? Well, there's 2 things I have to say about this, and hear me out on the first. I'm not being trite. It's a good recommendation, and that's look it up on YouTube. There's a ton of channels out there that give unbiased reviews that aren't sponsored, where you can see the actual functionality of the camera and not some digitally enhanced sample on the company's website or the Amazon store. Now, I know you're most likely watching this video on YouTube. You don't need need to be told to look for things on YouTube. What I learned the hard way, and what I'm trying to save you from doing, is that you don't start by looking on these channels. You'd waste a ton of time looking through way too many good options that have minimal difference, and you'll get stuck with analysis paralysis of which one to pick. What you want to do is find a camera that fits your price range and what you're looking for, and then the last thing you do before you buy it is just double check it on one of these YouTube channels to make sure it doesn't look or sound like this.
It has that old school infrared where it comes up kind of purple.
Now you might be thinking, but how will I find the camera that's going to give me the absolute best quality audio and the best quality video?
What you have to understand is the inside of a car is not made for recording cinematic masterpieces. The way your car's designed, where you hang the dash cam on your windshield, how loud your engine is, all those things are going to affect the sound waves bouncing around in the car and the sound that the camera picks up on. One thing I will say though, a lot of times people have told me that the cameras that I recommend to them have a rattling sound. And what that is it's not the camera. It's something as small as a penny in your glove compartment or a water bottle in your console that's just rattling, and the sound vibrates through the dash cord or it's hitting the wire and it's making the camera shake, and that's what it's picking up on. Another common problem, if the camera's too close to the air vent and you have your air conditioning or your heat on, that'll sound like a huge whooshing sound the entire recording. So if there is any blatant, obvious problems with your audio, the first thing that I would do is take your camera out of the car and plug it in your house and see if that audio problem's still there. If not, then you know it's something going on in your car that's rattling around or shaking the wire that's being picked up on the camera. Basically, what I'm getting at is do not expect to record beautiful audio in a moving car. That said, I've recently been messing around with, and this sounds like an ad, it's not an ad, it's free. I've been messing around with Adobe Podcast Enhancer or Adobe Voice Enhancer. Again, I'll put the link in the description, but it's a free AI tool where you can put the audio into it and it processes it, and it's amazing. It makes it sound really, really good. And I also want to say, I think that same kind of thinking that cars aren't meant for recording applies to camera quality as well. In my experience, the quality of the video you're going to get with a dash camera has about 30% to do with the actual camera and 70% to do with the lighting when you're recording. Obviously, if you put two cameras in the same situation, the better the camera, the better the footage. But even having the same camera on opposite ends of a windshield can drastically affect the footage that you get from it, because it all depends on the way light's bouncing around and hitting the lens. And I share all that because presumably you're getting a dash camera to capture these random moments in your car. And I don't know about you, but I've never had a rude Uber passenger that was willing to do a second take of being a jerk because I needed to find better lighting. Now, I want to briefly touch on a couple of these less important features before I tell you what my favorite dash cam is for recording inside a car.
Now, there are two features that dash cameras always seem to market and I couldn't care less about. And the first is the parking camera. I never use it, and here's why. For the parking camera to work, you need to constantly power the camera, which means connecting it to your battery. I know it's built to not drain the battery, but I have a 10-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles on it and seemingly a mind of its own. So on the off chance that it powers on and doesn't cut out, the risk of draining my battery is not worth the reward of capturing the 1 in a million piece of footage I get of somebody hitting my car. I mean, I've owned a car for almost 20 years now, and the only time I could think of a parking camera coming in handy were the 3 times that my car was broken into. But had I had a dash camera, I would assume those people would have stolen the camera as well. I always thought the parking camera feature was just marketing hype. Like what? Some guy riding a bike is going to take off my side view mirror, and if I turn over the video footage to the cops, the Philly PD is going to ignore the 400 murders we clocked in last year and put out an APB to catch the biker bandit? Better chance of the Eagles winning the World Series. The way I see it, it's one of those things where I think it's better not to know. I got enough things going on to worry about. I don't need to stress about what happens to my car when I'm not in it. And the second thing that I have absolutely no use for as an Uber and Lyft driver is the rear camera.
The main reason I never hooked up the rear camera is work first reward. To install that wiring all the way to the back of the car, the added space it would take on my memory card, and the added files to sort through when I'm looking for footage, it might sound trivial, but over time it adds up. And of course, this is a personal preference, so ask yourself, of all the times that you've been driving, How many times do you wish you had video footage of what was happening behind you? If you get rear-ended, the onus is on the person who rear-ends you to prove that it wasn't their fault. As an Uber and Lyft driver, I'm looking for a dash camera that's going to protect me for something that happens in the car. And sure, maybe there's a one-off event where you get somebody coming up to your car and damaging it or something like that. But, I mean, half the time you'll probably be able to see it with the interior-facing camera as it's shooting backwards. You know, if something were to happen behind my car right now, you would at least be able to see a figure if you needed to prove something or say that this is what they were doing, you know? Now, as far as having the ability to connect Wi-Fi, I just look at that as a convenience. It lets you access the camera files on your phone. That's it. Even though the cameras that I have the ability to do it, I never use it just because you have to have your phone nearby. And if I'm going to use any of the video footage, I'm going to want to use it on a desktop or a laptop. So I'm going to take it off there anyway. Sure, I guess it could save me a step from going from the phone to the, but I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I just like plugging my phone in and transferring that way. I feel like it's always faster and more reliable. And to be clear, it's not a bad thing to have. It's just something that I personally wouldn't base my decision on getting a camera for.
Now, as far as the GPS feature, of course, it can track your location, but more importantly, for driving purposes, it allows the camera to document how fast you were going. So, say a cop pulls you over and says you were speeding, you have evidence that proves otherwise. Whether you can use that in court, I'm not a lawyer, but I do have personal experience where a cop has accused me of doing one thing, and then when I mention that I have a dash camera, his memory gets a little more in tune with what actually happened. And for the record, I didn't even have to mention that I had the GPS feature. At the end of the day, do I think it's worth spending extra money for? Not really. Cool thing to have, but not totally necessary. Now, the last two features I want to talk about are super important, but it all comes down to personal preference, and that's the mount and the display. I personally can't stand cameras that don't have a display because it means that you have to connect it to an app just to see if you're recording and what the framing is like. Plus, as an Uber driver, I prefer my riders to clearly see that they're being recorded. I've always thought it better to deter people from acting a fool than to record them acting a fool, you know? Now, as far as the mount, it's either going to be a suction cup or a sticky mount. A sticky mount is much more reliable, but when that sucker is on, it is not coming off. The thing I like about suction cup mounts, especially as somebody who likes to take road trips in rental cars, it's much easier to transfer those kind of mounts to other cars. Downside is suction cups are much less reliable. The other thing you want to look for with a mount is if it swivels or not. I do like having the ability to move the camera left or right if I want to catch something that's happening outside of the normal range.
Now, before I give my recommendation, I have to say this one thing, and I'm not saying everybody who asked me what camera to use is thinking this, but I do know a lot of people are. What they're really asking is, what camera should they buy to help them go viral? There's two things I got to say about that. One, audio is what's most important. People will tolerate a low quality video, but people have no patience for bad audio. But as I mentioned earlier, it's an easy fix. You use the Adobe Voice Enhancer. The second thing, and most important, is your equipment is not what's going to help you build your platform. You need something that's going to provide value, whether it's informative or entertaining or interesting. When I explain this to people, I always point to The Office. I don't know if you've ever caught it, but there's a few scenes in there where they're recording in the car, and it looks like what they're using is what at the time would have been the first generation GoPro with a fisheye lens, very grainy. It just looks really bad. But nobody turns off The Office because it's a bad video. People keep watching The Office, and they keep watching Seinfeld and It's a Wonderful Life and fill in the blank with any sort of old movie or TV show because it's entertaining. It's providing them value. If the video's good, people will get past the quality. So if you're trying to build something or do something creative, stop worrying about the equipment and start focusing on things like storytelling and studying the platform that you're trying to succeed on. Okay, that's my spiel. Here's the cameras, I should say, that I recommend. And I know it's kind of a cop-out, but I'm going to recommend all three based on what you're comfortable spending. To me, that's what it comes down to when deciding between these three cameras. I mean, sure, the N5 is better quality than the N2, but is it $300 better quality? I don't think so. But then again, some people are into those specs like GPS and Wi-Fi. At the same time, if you're willing to sacrifice on quality, but you want those specs, I would go with the Ling Do at $200. And if you're just looking looking to get the job done, you just want to cover your bases and save as much money as possible, go with the Vantrue N2 Pro. You're not going to go wrong with that. And I'll say one last thing. The N5 is by far my favorite of these three cameras, but had they not sent it to me, there's a 0% chance I would have spent the money for that, and I just would have got a cheaper camera. To sum it up, the most important thing is you just get something that fits those three principles. And if you are an Uber or Lyft driver, my only hope for you is that you're never in a position where the dash camera has to save you, like it did for me here. But let's be real, anybody who has driven for Uber and Lyft knows that that's an impossibility. So stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, guys.